I think initially I was really speechless, and I didn't know what to say. It just felt like a bad dream. It didn't seem possible. It is such a betrayal for a spouse to go through what we're walking through. And
welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. We're here today to review chapter 6. It's called Tearing Apart. And this chapter is all about the aftermath of what happens in the Megyn Kelly interview, the fact that Jill and her sister Jessa stood up for Josh within this interview, and then so many other behaviors start to come out and manifest in the home with Josh, and then also everything about what happens with the Ashley Madison scandal really rocks the family in many ways. By now, I hope that all of you have seen that this book, Counting the Cost, has hit the New York Times bestseller list, number 2 after some book by Elon Musk, which is kind of funny. I am so happy for Jill. I hope that they get the outcome from this book is just marvelous for them, and they will never have to depend on or go back to Jim Bob for anything else in their lives. I do believe the few copies that we've bought on this channel, I think it's been 4 so far, that really helped put them over the top to get on the list. So go, Jill. I'm so proud of her. The beginning of chapter 5 talks about Jill's feelings about the Megyn Kelly interview. And she really frames it like she wanted to go on this interview to support and defend her parents, not Josh. That doesn't really come up as much about Josh. She does say that she feels like what happened with him was in the past, but for her, this interview was about putting out there like our parents are good parents and they didn't do anything wrong. Like, we've gotten through this. They did the best they could to help us get through it. And this was really the motivating factor for her for appearing in this interview. In the background, she and Derek were speaking extensively about, like, do we want to go ahead and just move down to El Salvador and start our missionary work? And obviously, with all of the paparazzi swarming around them and all of these problems going on in a big way, it felt like this was kind of maybe even God calling them to go ahead and go down and get away from all of this by heading into South America and doing the missionary work.
We've got tarantulas, scorpions, and just natural hazards like that. And then, of course, the geopolitical instability adds to that.
Throughout all of this, and this has been a major theme within the book, Jill continues to have ongoing nightmares and trouble sleeping. And she credits this primarily with the fact that the information was released to the public and the are just all around, and that she has a lot of fears about how she's being treated in the public, and it affects her emotional health, and she often gets very concerned about the privacy of her family. So now it's time to go to El Salvador, and in a way it feels like it's kind of shadowed over this happy time of being able to leave and finally start the work that they wanted to do. It's being overshadowed by what's going on with Josh, especially because they don't want anyone to know where they're going to be in El Salvador. They want the location to be private because doing this kind of work does come with dangers, and El Salvador is the type of environment where people do get hurt, kidnapped, those kinds of things. So they're trying to keep it very private, but shortly after they arrive there, someone tracks them down. And there's a whole story about it in the book. I'm not going to go into all of it, but essentially people were manipulating the missionary post, telling them they just wanted to come and like see what work they were doing, but really they were looking for Jill and Derek, and then they put out the information that Jill and Derek are there, and now everybody knows where they're located. There was severe gang violence present in that area. And although they were living on the mission's property, it could still be, still a lot of risk, especially to Derek, who is leaving the home every day to go out and do work within the community. Whereas Jill, she stays home and she does go to the church and do some work as well, but they have their very small son with them. These are not easy circumstances to live in. I've talked about this before earlier in the book. When I go to live abroad, we get to live in these amazing homes provided by my husband's work. Whereas when I've done any kind of volunteer work, I'm around missionaries, I see the way that they're living, and it's so different from anything that I've experienced. It is really hard labor. It is not easy to do. They oftentimes don't have any money. They may be living without like all the regular appliances we have here in the US, and without air conditioning and just like comforts that you could have anywhere in the United States, even if you're living in poverty. They don't have them. So I have a lot of respect for Jill and Derek, even if you are someone who's like, I don't really believe in the idea of doing missionary work where you're trying to spread your own religion in another culture. I feel that way as well. Now, as time has gone on and I've been in these other cultures, I really see that my stance is like, I just want to respect their own religion and who they are. So I can feel two ways about it. I'm really proud of Derek and Jill, and I think they were doing really hard work that they believed in. And I also feel that the work of missionaries sometimes can be very self-serving to the organization of the church, even though the missionaries themselves are usually very selfless people who are out there doing this because they truly believe in it. And I think that was the case with Derek and Jill.
Central America is definitely challenging. We are in the middle of a jungle pretty much, so that's not going to stop at the doorsteps of our house.
While living out on the mission field, Jill states that she feels really grateful for the space it provides her between herself and her family.
He speaks his own language right now, the language of Israel.
Ball. What's that? What's that? Cars, motorcycle.
But unfortunately, the show still had a hold on them because she would often wake up to emails being bounced back and forth about, when they would be able to film, when they would be able to come back to the US and do some filming. And there's just a lot of constant being roped back in, pulled back in, even though they're so far away. And this is why I have so much respect for them. Derek wants to live his own life. He's taken his family and they've gone.
One of the side effects for rainy season is power outages, and those happen pretty frequently, sometimes longer than others, but with that can come water outages. Still no water.
Now, we understand that they were raising money for their missionary work, and she goes into that here. And I think it all makes sense when you read it in the book that this was not a situation where they just had a bunch of money. They weren't getting paid by the show. Derek had been working at Walmart. They are not a well-off family. They struggle. And part of what they were told by Chad, this person who's working with Jim Bob in the show, was that they would be supported through these fundraising opportunities, and that the show would kind of like pull people to donate some money to them by showing their missionary work on the show. Okay. So from my point of view, this seems very reasonable. They're not getting paid. They're doing hard work. People who criticize them about the fundraising, I just don't really understand. People do fundraise for missionary work, and they seem like they're just like anybody else who would need that kind of money. They didn't have money from Jim Bob. They didn't have money from TLC.
The water's been out for almost 3 days. When the water goes out, typically dishes and laundry stack up pretty fast. That means you get disposable diaper.
Jill writes, "Whenever we could, we savored the moments of calm that this simple life brought us." Finally, I think for Jill, she had never really experienced that. Just thinking about living in a home where it's just her and her baby, and Derek goes out for the day, when she's used to being around 18 other kids and parents and all these family members who are visiting. Like, this must have been the quietest her life had ever been. And she really appreciated seeing Derek in like his element. And she just really gives him a lot of praise here. I think Derek is one of the best husbands that came into that family. And it has always really bothered me when people criticize him because of his more like conservative beliefs or stance. I mean, I just question, like, what do you really expect from the Duggars? I mean, when people are raised in this type of way and raised to believe certain things, they can move more to the middle, away from the right or left. They can move more into the middle little by little, in little increments. I know that there have been issues with the LGBTQ plus community and things that Derek has said. And it always hurts my heart to think about or hear about that, because I truly think that regardless of what he says, this is actually the kind of person that if someone was right in front of him and that person was transgender, whatever the problem was, and they needed something, he would be the first to hop up and give it to them and do something to help them. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you could have someone who is extremely liberal, extremely vocal about supporting, for example, the LGBTQ, and then that same transgender person could be in front of them and have some problem, and that person would be like, I'm not getting involved in this. I support you, but from a distance, you know? And those are just my opinions. And I am very much in support of people living however they want to live. I've always fallen more on the liberal side of life, but I truly believe that that's probably the truth of the situation. There are a lot of people who pay lip service, who wouldn't do a damn thing to help another person. And here we have Derek, who has said some things that people don't like, but I believe if that person was in front of him and needed help, he would do anything to help them. So there's a difference in that way, in my opinion. Okay, so Derek and Jill, they're living in El Salvador, and they share some pictures in the book. And that's one of the main reasons why you guys, like, I hope that you'll still get the book if you're able to. And I am going to do more giveaways for it, because there are a lot of pictures in here that you're not going to see other places. And I've shown like maybe 2 of them, but there are a lot more, and they are very interesting to see. They're ones that you can't really find online. So there's a picture of Derek and Jill and their son in front of their little home in El Salvador, and they just look like Earth Mama hippies. And it's really cute. Oh, my puppy dog. Spookley just spilled coffee all over my book, but look how cute he is. Look how mad he is. Oh, Spookley. Come on, I want to see you. You don't like it? You don't like it? You look so cute. Come on, show the back. It's glitzy. Okay, so all these bows were my daughter's like old bows that she won't wear anymore. So now I'm wearing them, or Luke's. He doesn't like it. And he spilled coffee all over my book. Oh well, life goes on. Okay, so Derek and Jill are living in El Salvador when Derek actually sees something on Twitter about Josh, and that's how he finds out about the Ashley Madison scandal. So he hadn't even heard from his family, and he hears about it. And Jill writes, I felt my heart plunge in my chest. And she said, for the first time, she decides to be active in trying to figure out like what's going on here and why this is happening, instead of just passively waiting to hear from someone what happened. And she actually goes straight to Josh, and she texts him trying to get information about what is going on. And no surprise, she gets no reply. A day or 2 later, Mom called, she writes, and Michelle says, it's been devastating for Anna and the kids. And I could hear the same weary, frustrated tone that she had used in the Oklahoma cabin just a couple of months earlier. She told me that the rumors were true, that Josh had confessed that he'd been addicted to pee for years, and that he had paid to join a social networking site for people wanting to cheat on their spouses. I don't even know what to say about where Michelle is with all of this, right? Because from my point of view, I pray to God that this is not a situation I would ever be in. And I think that if I was in Michelle's situation, I would definitely be going to my husband, like, we need to do something, just in general. Like, we need to change how we're parenting. We need to get him out of here and protect everyone else. I mean, I just would be like, enough is enough. And I think we don't know a lot about how Michelle has reacted within the home, but we do know about the letter that she wrote to the judge when Josh was convicted of CSAM. And the way, I know, Spookley's like, CSAM, he doesn't like it either. But the point is that we've seen this letter. It was weird, and like, it seemed as though it was really trying to be like, yeah, he's done some things, but he's still a good boy. Yeah, he's done some things, but he's still a good boy. Heart. The letter was difficult to read, and it felt really sad. And if I were Michelle, I think I would lose my mind. I think I would go crazy. I think I would take a knife and stab my son in the kidney. I mean, that's so horrible. I'm trying to make light of a really terrible situation in a way that I am saying if I was in the same situation as Michelle, I would absolutely lose it, because I would see my son as an extension of who I am, how I've been as a parent. And I would just be like, I am not going to allow this. I'm not going to allow you to do this to your sisters and then to turn around and do something very similar to other women around you, including your own wife, Anna. So Jill talks to her mom. She gets off the phone with her mother, and Derek looks at her and says, what's going to happen now? And Jill says, he's being sent away again. Okay, so Derek and Jill, they have to go back to the United States to deal with some prior commitments that mainly revolve around Jill's midwifery. Okay. And it happened to coincide with the fall, my favorite time of year. But I can also feel the melancholy in Jill in the passage here where she writes, like, returning back to Arkansas in the fall was like bittersweet because of the fact that she's coming back to a place where everything has happened with Josh. But then she also has so many great memories of the fall with her family there. She writes about how she loved going to Silver Dollar City, their favorite theme park. She talks about Bible charades at home with the family. And she writes, we had so much fun back then, but when we returned from El Salvador, the big house felt different to me. There was no Scott, no TV cameras, no visitors sitting with Pops in his office. The big house had lost its usual buzz of excitement. It felt somber. Mom looked tired. So they arrive home, and immediately Jim Bob has a little bit of news to share with them after greeting them and, talking about how much they love Israel and how much they've missed him. He says, I just talked to Josh and the guy who runs the place where he is staying. He seems to be doing good. He's been working in the kitchen, and the guy who runs the program says he's doing really well. He said he's been like a role model for some of the others, and he's their best person there, right? So we heard this recently about the prison, right? People were saying, like, it was just being released, like, Josh is a role model in the prison. This was very early on. And now things have, like, tanked downward. And people are like, that guy just doesn't care about anyone. And he's done. And he's not even, like, involved in the ministry anymore. Those are the rumors on the street, which sounds more like Josh than any of this. He always has to, quote unquote, be the best person there, even in rehab, which should have been an indicator that things are not getting better. Because no, Jim Bob, he's not the best person there in rehab. I would have, like, if the person who's in charge of the facility actually said that to me and I was you, I would be like, okay, I don't think you understand the real problem that's going on here. He's not the best person. We got to move him to another facility. If this is really how you're looking at Josh, then you're perpetuating a problem that Josh has had his whole life, where he's always been the center of attention and he's always been the best at everything, even when he wasn't. Okay, and my understanding is that the bodyguards that worked with the family, they worked with Josh up until he went up to this facility. And Jim Bob talks about how they had a hard time getting Josh up to the facility because paparazzi were swarming all around them. And there were photographers placed around the facility when they arrived. And this really ends up hitting Jill in the face, like someone slapped her in the face. That's the feeling I get from what she writes next. She says, though I love my parents and it made a lot of sense that they would want to protect and care for their child, I couldn't help but think about the lengths that Pops had gone to in order to guard Josh's privacy and keep him from being publicly humiliated. And then she mentions it to Derek and he says, like, I see the same thing. Jill says, when the In Touch story broke, all I had wanted was to be protected. And all I wanted was to have privacy and space to grieve without feeling the weight upon myself to fix the situation. I knew that in time, we were all going to do what we could to fight for justice in the legal system that had failed us. But back then when we'd sat in that cabin discussing the show, what I'd really wanted was for Pops to say, no, we're not going to put you on Fox News. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you girls out of this. All right, so that's the first part of chapter 5, and I think this is a good place to stop with my coffee covered in coffee now. Right, I mean, I think something that's quite surprising for me reading the book is realizing that Jim Bob really isn't using much of his money towards protecting or helping Jill and Derek. That's what it seems like to me. It's like not only are they not getting paid, which we already knew, but I thought that Jim Bob would be providing a hell of a lot more financial support in general, like putting them up in a private place where no one can get to them and making sure it's blocked off, making sure that Jill and Jessa and the girls are like very well protected, getting them out of situations. I mean, it seems like he is using the money for that when it comes to Josh. That's what it seems like to me. But then I also remember, which I find really interesting, that after the Ashley Madison scandal broke and then the show Counting On came out, I'm sure you guys remember that Anna Duggar is interviewed for the show and she's at the big house, and it's like they make it look like she's living at the big house with her children in the girls' room, in the teenager and little girl's room with her kids. Now, maybe they gave her a separate bedroom and that's just not really shown on the show. But once again, all this money and you are not helping people who are really the victims of the situation, but tens of thousands of dollars is just thrown at Josh Duggar in the way of paying for him to go to like a private facility and get therapy and get rehab, where like maybe Jill and Jessa and Anna are the ones that really need rehab, where they go away and get taken care of and everything gets done for them and tens of thousands of dollars are paid. You know, I mean, that's one of the surprises for me in the book, is I definitely expected Jill to say, well, then my father put us up in this big, nice house to kind of give us some privacy. He did this, he did that. The family did this and that for us in order to ensure that we were okay, given all that was going on. Jill's book is a glimpse not only at like some of the financial and emotional neglect and abuse that she suffered, but I think it's also kind of a look at the way in which things within the Duggar household are happening so disproportionately, right? So, you know, Jim Bob seems very willing to help certain people and not willing to help others. And it doesn't really make sense because at this point in time, Jill is still towing the line, probably bigger than anyone else. She went on the Megyn Kelly show. She helps her dad start counting on. She is doing missionary work, which he said at first he was going to be okay with. So, it's really unfair in the most extreme way because she's doing everything that's asked of her and she's still getting treated badly. All right, guys, I'm so glad that you were here for this part of the chapter. We'll finish chapter 5 tomorrow. What do you guys think about this portion of the book? We are about to really get into the crux of what happens between Jim Bob and Jill because Jill's ready to pull away, and that's when Jim Bob becomes the most irrational and abusive towards her. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope that you'll join me next time as we head down our next rabbit hole.